"Daddy, I'm so hungry. Can I eat with you?" The words were small, almost polite, but they struck Henry Cole with the force of a blow to the chest. He lifted his eyes from the pristine white plate in front of him. She couldn't have been more than 4. Her hoodie hung off one shoulder, stained and frayed. Her knees were scraped. Her curly hair framed a face too serious for a child her age, and her eyes, dark, wide, painfully earnest, were fixed on him with absolute certainty. Henry didn't answer. For a split second, he thought this was some kind of mistake. A dare. A distraction. But the girl didn't laugh. She didn't look around for approval. She only swallowed hard and repeated, softer this time, as if afraid she'd asked for too much. "Daddy, I'm really hungry." The word hit him again. "Daddy." A chill ran through his spine. Henry blinked once, twice. The child didn't flinch. She clutched the edge of the tablecloth like it was her last tether to dignity. "Please, Daddy. I'm hungry." His first instinct was denial. Reflex, logical, cold. "I'm not your father." The words pressed against the back of his throat, but they didn't come out, because she looked exactly like someone he used to know. No, not used to know someone he'd lost. Before Henry could speak, a sharp voice cut through the silence. "What do you think you're doing?" A tall man in a dark suit stormed toward them. His expression twisted with anger and embarrassment. The restaurant manager. He didn't look at Henry at first. His eyes locked onto the child like she was a stain on the floor. "Where are your parents?" he snapped. "You can't be here." The girl flinched. I just wanted to eat with my daddy," she said, pointing at Henry with trembling fingers. The manager laughed, a short, ugly sound. "That man is not your father. Don't lie." Henry finally found his voice. "Wait." But the manager had already grabbed the girl by the arm. "Come on. We don't allow begging here. You're disturbing the guests." "No," Mila cried. "Daddy." She twisted, fighting the grip with surprising strength, her small hands reaching desperately toward Henry's table. "Please, Daddy, don't let him take me." The word ripped through Henry's chest. Every instinct he had, every carefully trained reflex to remain composed collapsed at once. "Let go of her," Henry said, standing abruptly. The manager glanced at him, startled, but his grip tightened instead. "Sir, I'm so sorry about this. These kids know how to manipulate." Mila screamed when he yanked her back. She kicked, lost her balance, and in the struggle the manager shoved her aside to regain control. She hit the stone floor hard. The sound was sickening. Mila cried out, curling instinctively, her hands scraping against the ground. A thin line of blood appeared on her forehead where it had struck the edge of a planter. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Henry exploded. "Are you out of your mind?" he roared. The manager froze. "Sir, get away from her." Now. Henry dropped to his knees without hesitation, ignoring the murmurs, the phones already lifting around them. He reached for Mila carefully, his hands shaking as he cupped her face. "Hey," he said, voice breaking. "Hey, look at me." Her sobs hitched when she saw him close. "I didn't mean to be bad," she cried. "I just wanted to stay with you." Something inside Henry shattered completely. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said fiercely. He pulled his handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it gently to her forehead. "Nothing. Do you hear me?" She nodded weakly, still crying. Henry looked up at the manager, his eyes cold in a way that made the man step back. "If you touch her again, I will personally make sure you never work in this city again." The manager paled. "Sir, I didn't know." "You knew she was a child," Henry said. "That should have been enough." He turned back to Mila and lifted her carefully into his arms. She stiffened at first, unused to being held, then clung to his jacket like he might disappear if she let go. "Daddy?" she whispered, uncertainly. Henry closed his eyes. "I'm here," he said. "I've got you." The waiter approached hesitantly. "Sir, should I call someone?" "Yes," Henry said, without looking away from the child. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. But not the police. Not yet. Izesta. He dialed a number from memory. "Gregory," he said, when the line connected. "I need you at the Broadmoor rooftop. Immediately. Bring a medical kit." And I want a full background search. Quiet. He ended the call and looked down at Mila again. Can you tell me your name? He asked softly. Mila, she sniffed. That's a beautiful name, he said, and meant it. She looked at the table, then back at him. Can I still eat? Or am I in trouble? Henry swallowed hard. You're not in trouble, he said. And yes, you can eat. He carried her to the chair across from him and set her down gently. When the waiter returned with soup, bread, and water, Mila stared at it like it might vanish. If I eat, she whispered, you won't send me away? Henry met her eyes, the weight of every unmade choice in his life pressing down on him. No, he said, I won't. She took the smallest bite, watching him the entire time. As she ate, Henry noticed the way her hands trembled, the way she tried to make herself small. This wasn't just hunger. This was a child who had learned that kindness could be revoked at any moment. After a while, she looked up again. You look like my daddy, she said. He was called Eric. The name hit Henry like a blow. The fork slipped from his hand, clattering against the plate. Eric, a ghost from a life he had buried, a mistake he had refused to acknowledge. Mila's eyes widened. Did I say something wrong? No, Henry said, his voice barely steady. You said something important. He looked at her, really looked at her, and understood, with terrifying clarity, that this moment was not an accident. It was a reckoning, and as the city moved on around them, indifferent and loud, Henry Cole realized that for the first time in years, he didn't want to run. He wanted to stay. If you felt Henry's heartbreak, like this video and comment where you're watching from, you might just find someone nearby watching with you. Henry Cole didn't care. He had spent a lifetime caring too much about appearances, about maintaining distance, control, and detachment. But at this moment, holding a trembling little girl who had called him daddy and bled in his presence, nothing else in the world mattered. Mila sat on the chair beside him now, clutching a napkin gently pressed against the cut on her forehead. Henry had handed it to her himself, kneeling in front of her like a man with no pride left to protect. She dabbed the wound carefully, as if afraid to use too much of the cloth, afraid to be too visible. Does it hurt? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. She shrugged. Not really. I've had worse. The simplicity of her answer knocked the breath from his lungs. Worse? At 4 years old, she had already normalized pain. He reached for his water glass, but his hand shook as he lifted it. Mila noticed, then quickly looked away, as though the sight of his vulnerability scared her more than her own blood. Do you want more bread? He asked. She nodded once, small and polite. Henry broke off a piece and slid it toward her on a clean plate. She picked it up like a squirrel taking food from an unfamiliar hand, grateful, but expecting it to be snatched back at any moment. I called someone, he said after a moment. He's a friend. He's going to help us figure out where you belong. Mila's chewing slowed. I belong here, she said softly. With you. Henry blinked. The words caught him off guard, though they shouldn't have. Everything about this child, her gaze, her plea, her scream when the manager tried to pull her away, had pointed to one truth. She believed with her whole heart that he was hers. You said your daddy's name was Eric, he said carefully. She nodded. Daddy Eric. Henry swallowed. The name echoed through his head like a forgotten memory dredged from the bottom of a locked drawer. Do you remember where you used to live? With Daddy. Then after the fire, the lady took me. At night. What lady? I don't know her name. She smelled like bleach. Said Daddy was sleeping too long. Said I had to go with her now. Mila's fingers twisted the edge of the napkin. She said nobody else would want me. Henry's throat tightened. He fought the urge to call Gregory and tell him to find the woman immediately, but he knew better than to make decisions fueled only by rage. Not when a child was watching, not when every word would shape how safe she felt in his care. Gregory's on his way, he said instead. He'll help us find out more. Mila didn't look up. Do you think Daddy's still sleeping? Henry couldn't lie. No, he said gently. I don't think he's sleeping anymore. She didn't cry. That was the worst part. She just nodded, like she already knew, like she'd known for days and had been waiting for someone to say it out loud. They sat in silence. The soup in front of her cooled, untouched. Finally, Henry pushed his chair back, stood, and offered his hand. "Come with me," he said. Mila stared at it, hesitant. "Where?" she whispered. "To somewhere quieter, safer. I won't leave you." Her small hand slid into his. Cool. Fragile. Trusting. They moved through the restaurant like ghosts, eyes following their every step. The same people who had ignored her a few minutes ago now watched her as though she were part of a strange, unfolding drama. Henry ignored them. In the private lounge downstairs, away from the curious diners, Gregory was already waiting tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored gray suit. His expression was calm, but his eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the child. "This her?" he asked quietly. Henry nodded. "Her name is Mila." Gregory crouched slightly, his voice kind and slow. "Hi, Mila. I'm Greg. I'm a friend of your friend's." Mila looked at Henry for confirmation. He nodded, and she gave a tiny wave. "Can you do something for me?" Henry asked her. "Greg needs to check your arm, just to make sure you're okay." "Can he do that?" Mila hesitated, then nodded. Gregory examined her quickly, careful not to scare her, then looked up. "She's bruised, scraped, but nothing broken. We should get her checked out at the hospital." Henry exhaled. "I'll take her." Gregory raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? I can escort her if—" "No," Henry interrupted. "She stays with me." Gregory didn't argue. He handed over a folder. "I did a fast check on the name she gave. Eric. Fire in the Bronx. 2 weeks ago. Man in his 30s. No ID. Found dead inside a tenement. Listed as transient. No next of kin." Henry took the file slowly. "Eric," he whispered. "Sound familiar?" Henry nodded once. "I think he was someone I used to know." Gregory didn't press. "What do you want to do?" Henry looked down at Mila, who now clung to his pant leg. "I want to find out who she is, who he was. I want answers." Gregory handed him another sheet. "Start here. DNA test. Paperwork. Medical evaluation. She's not a stray dog, Henry. If you want to protect her, you need to do it the right way." "I know," Henry said, but something in his voice shook. As Mila leaned into his side, Henry realized something terrifying and undeniable. She had already decided he was her family. Now the question was, would he become the man she already believed he was? He tightened his arm around her shoulder. "We're going to the hospital," he said softly. "Then we'll figure out the rest." Mila didn't ask what came next. She just nodded. Because for the first time in days, maybe weeks, someone wasn't letting go. The drive to Street Luke's hospital was quiet. Mila sat in the back seat beside Henry, a clean towel now pressed gently against the shallow cut on her forehead. She hadn't said a word since they left the rooftop restaurant. Her small fingers toyed with the seatbelt buckle, not to unclip it, but as if trying to reassure herself it was real, that she was really in a car, really sitting next to the man she still believed was her father. Henry kept glancing at her, uncertain of what to say. He wasn't used to silence feeling this heavy. Silence was usually his armor, his method of control. But with Mila beside him, it felt more like a test, one he wasn't sure he was passing. The city blurred past the tinted windows. Autumn leaves drifted across the road. Horns, chatter, sirens in the distance. But inside the car, only the hum of the engine filled the space between them. "You hungry again?" Henry finally asked. Mila shook her head. "You sure?" Another nod. Quiet. Too quiet. Henry leaned back, watching her from the corner of his eye. "You don't have to be afraid of me." "80s. I'm not afraid," she said, almost defensively. "I'm afraid of them." "Who?" "The people who take you away." The words twisted inside him. "No one's taking you anywhere, Mila. Not without my say." She looked up, eyes wide. "Because you're the boss?" Henry smiled faintly. "Something like that." The hospital came into view, white stone, glass walls, and the constant shuffle of life and loss moving through its halls. Gregory had already called ahead. No emergency room, no waiting in line. Henry wasn't interested in headlines, and he wasn't handing Mila over to a crowded triage desk. They were met at a side entrance by a nurse and a young pediatrician, Dr. Patel. warm-eyed and calm-voiced. She crouched to Mila's level with a practiced ease that immediately softened the child's shoulders. "Hi there, Mila. I'm Dr. Patel. I'm just going to take a look at your bump, okay? Nothing scary." Mila didn't answer, but she looked at Henry, who gave her a small nod. That seemed to be enough. Inside a quiet exam room, Mila perched on the edge of the hospital bed. Henry stood nearby, arms crossed, still in his dark blazer, watching every movement. He was silent but present, protective. "She's got a minor cut," Dr. Patel confirmed, dabbing gently with antiseptic. "We'll clean it. No stitches needed. Some bruising on the shoulder and elbow, but no signs of deeper trauma. Physically, she's holding up." Henry raised an eyebrow. "And emotionally?" Dr. Patel's expression grew more cautious. "That's harder to say. She's showing signs of stress-induced suppression, hypervigilance. She's clearly been neglected, possibly abandoned. Can we run a DNA test?" The doctor hesitated. "Is there a legal guardian present?" "I'm working on that," Henry replied. "For now, let's assume I am." Dr. Patel didn't argue. She nodded and signaled for a nurse to collect the necessary kit. "Mila," the doctor said gently, "we're going to take a little swab from your cheek. It won't hurt, I promise." Mila barely blinked. The nurse swabbed her mouth quickly and efficiently. She stayed still the whole time, as if she'd learned long ago not to make anything harder for grown-ups. Once the test was done, Mila leaned against the wall, clearly tired. Her legs dangled off the edge of the bed, not quite touching the floor. Dr. Patel lowered her voice as she pulled Henry aside. "You said her father's name might have been Eric?" "That's what she told me." Dr. Patel glanced at the clipboard in her hands. "We had an unidentified male brought in 2 weeks ago from a building fire in the Bronx. Burned beyond recognition. The only clue we had was a melted dog tag with the name Eric C. No confirmed ID. No one claimed the body." Henry's jaw clenched. "Do you still have him?" She nodded. "We had him stored pending further investigation. No known relatives came forward. We've been waiting for a match through the missing persons system. I want his DNA compared to hers." Quietly, Dr. Patel looked at him more closely now. "You think she's his daughter?" "I know she is." The doctor nodded solemnly. "I'll start the comparison." "But Henry." "What? If this turns out the way I think it will, there's going to be a lot of red tape ahead. CPS, the courts, custody issues. I don't care. Just find out." 18. Back inside the room, Mila was lying on her side, curled up. Her shoes, too small and worn, sat neatly on the floor beside her. She was watching Henry through half-lidded eyes. "Are you going to leave now?" she asked. Henry pulled a chair closer and sat beside her, elbows on his knees. "No," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. My other daddy left when the fire came. I waited. He didn't come back. He didn't want to leave you." Mila didn't respond right away. He said, "If anything ever happened, I should look for someone who looked like him." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You look like him." Henry sat still, trying to breathe past the lump in his throat. "I think he meant you," she added. He swallowed hard. Outside the room, the city moved on. Children were born, lives ended, ambulances came and went. But inside that small corner of the hospital, time slowed. Henry reached into his jacket and pulled out a photo from his wallet, one he hadn't looked at in years. It was old, creased at the corners, showing a much younger version of himself, and another man who looked nearly identical, a face from his past. He handed it to Mila. "That's him," she said immediately. "That's my daddy. That's Eric." Henry closed his eyes, his heart thudding. So it was true. All of it. And now she was his. Not by blood not yet confirmed, but by something deeper. Something chosen. Something still salvageable. That night, Henry Cole didn't return to his penthouse. Instead, he sat in a quiet waiting area just off the pediatric ward at St. Luke's Hospital, one floor below the maternity wing where he'd once paced the halls, waiting for a child who never came home. Now, 20 years later, another child was asleep in a hospital bed down the hall. A child who had called him Daddy, without knowing the depth of what she said. A child who shared the eyes, the fear, and he now knew the blood of the son he had turned away decades ago. He held the photo in his hands again. The one he'd given to Mila. 2 young men, Henry and Eric, shoulder to shoulder at a youth shelter fundraiser. Same jawline, same thick eyebrows, but different smiles. Henry's was polite, restrained. Eric's was hopeful, honest. He hadn't seen that face in 20 years. Gregory returned, walking quietly, holding a plain manila envelope. Henry stood up before he even spoke. "What do we know?" Gregory handed him the envelope. Dr. Patel rushed the match. Her credentials helped push it through. Henry opened it and read the results. Paternity match, 99.94% probability. Mila R. is the biological granddaughter of Henry Cole. For a moment, the air was too thick to breathe. Henry sat down slowly, letting the truth settle. Eric had been his son, and Mila, this small, wide-eyed girl who had mistaken him for her father, was his only living blood relative. Gregory broke the silence. "You okay?" Henry didn't answer immediately. His fingers curled around the edge of the report. "She called me Daddy," he said softly, "and I didn't stop her. She needed someone," Gregory replied. "She still does." "I turned Eric away," Henry whispered. "He came to me once, years ago. I didn't recognize him. Or maybe I did, and I didn't want to." Gregory sat beside him. "Regret doesn't undo what's already happened, but it can decide what happens next." Henry nodded slowly. "She's staying with me," he said. "I don't care what it takes. Lawyers, judges, whatever hoops the state wants to build. I'm not letting her go." Gregory leaned back, arms crossed. "I figured you'd say that. I already contacted Marion Hayes." Henry blinked. "The family court attorney? She owes you a favor." "I figured you'd want the best." Henry nodded. "You figured right." At that moment, a soft voice interrupted them. "Mr. Cole?" Dr. Patel had returned, holding a folder. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were sharper now, more assessing. "I saw the results," she said. "Are you ready to talk next steps?" Henry stood. "Yes. In the short term," she began, "you can file for emergency temporary guardianship. It'll keep CPS out of the picture while you move forward. But long term, you'll need to petition for permanent custody or adoption." "I am by Dad." "Done," Henry said. "Whatever paperwork is needed, I'll sign it tonight." Dr. Patel nodded. "I'll notify the social worker on call. We'll expedite the process." Henry glanced down the hall. "How's she doing?" "She's resting. She didn't ask for anything except one thing." "What?" "She asked if she could eat breakfast with you." Henry's throat tightened. "Tell her yes." The doctor smiled, soft and genuine. "I already did." "I would not." The next morning, Henry arrived early, balancing a tray of pancakes, strawberries, and warm syrup from the hospital cafeteria. He didn't usually carry anything himself, not phones, not coffee, not documents. But today, it felt important. Mila was sitting up in the bed when he entered, hugging her knees under the blanket. Her forehead was bandaged, and someone had brushed her hair back with gentle hands. She looked small, cleaner, but no less fragile. When she saw him, her face lit up with a cautious hope. "You came back." "I said I would." She nodded, satisfied. "You brought pancakes?" "I did." She reached for the tray before hesitating. "Can I eat first? Or do you have to talk to people?" Henry shook his head. "You eat. That's the most important thing right now." She beamed and dug in, carefully using the plastic fork and napkin like someone who had been taught rules but never given permission to break them. Henry watched her eat in silence. After a few bites, Mila looked up. "Are you going to stay my daddy now?" The question was quiet, but it didn't come from confusion. It came from longing. Henry set down his coffee. "I want to be. But I need to do some things first, so I can make sure no one takes you away again. Even the lady who said I was trouble? Especially her." Mila took another bite, chewed slowly. "Daddy Eric said if anything ever happened, he hoped someone nice would find me." She looked up again. "You're nice." Henry didn't respond, not right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded letter Gregory had found at the shelter near the Bronx fire. It had been water damaged, parts of it unreadable, but the closing line remained. If anyone ever finds my girl, please don't let her grow up thinking she wasn't wanted. He looked at Mila eating pancakes with syrup smeared on her cheek, eyes flicking to him like she was still afraid he'd vanish, and he felt it in his bones. I won't let you grow up thinking that, he said, voice rough. Not ever. She smiled, leaned over, and whispered, Okay, Daddy. And in that small, sunlit hospital room, Henry Cole, the billionaire, the tycoon, the man known for firing board members without blinking, felt something unfamiliar swell in his chest. Not guilt, not power, not even grief. Hope. Henry Cole stood in front of the elevator, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding a legal envelope from the hospital's administration. Behind him, through the glass door of room 414, Mila was sleeping again, one arm around the hospital's teddy bear, the other gripping the corner of his blazer she'd refused to let go of until her eyes shut. He hadn't meant to stay overnight. But when she woke up at 3 a.m., crying for Daddy Eric, and clung to him like the world would vanish if she let go, he didn't have it in him to leave. The room had a recliner meant for parents. For the first time in years, Henry used one. Now it was morning again, and everything had changed. The DNA results were real. The hospital had filed the temporary guardianship forms with the city clerk. Dr. Patel had personally walked him through next steps, adding only one request. Be sure, she'd said. This child has already been left too many times, he was sure. But certainty didn't quiet the voice in his head, the one whispering about everything he should have done 2 decades earlier. The elevator doors opened. Mr. Cole, Gregory's voice broke through the fog of Henry's thoughts. The head of security stepped out of the lift with a neutral expression, but his tone had a weight to it, like he'd seen something he hadn't expected to. You got something? Henry asked. Gregory nodded. You said you wanted everything on Eric. Henry glanced around, then gestured toward the consultation room nearby. Once inside, Gregory locked the door and pulled out a small USB drive from his coat pocket, along with a stack of printed transcripts. Found 2 voicemails, Gregory said. One left on an old business line. The other never made it past the automated operator. It was deleted but stored on a mirrored backup server. We pulled it before it wiped. Henry's stomach tightened. From Eric? Gregory handed him the paper. Henry read the first message. It was dated 6 years ago. Mr. Cole, you don't know me, but I think I'm your son. My name is Eric. I'm not asking for anything. I'd like to talk. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But if I'm right, then I've spent my whole life not knowing who I am, and I'm just tired of wondering. My number is... The message cut off. Henry sat down, the transcript trembling slightly in his grip. The second voicemail was even harder to read. The words had been transcribed phonetically. Low quality, broken, but unmistakably from the same voice. Don't know if you'll hear this. Don't know if you care. But I'm scared. My daughter, she's all I have. I don't have anywhere else to go. Please, if you hear this, don't let her end up in the system. She's good, better than me. Don't let her think she's a mistake. The timestamp. 2 weeks ago. The same night Eric died. Henry closed his eyes, the weight of it pressing against his chest. He had called. Twice, and both times, Henry hadn't picked up. Once because he didn't recognize the number. The second time, because he'd shut down that particular business line years ago. I never heard these, he said aloud. Gregory gave a tight nod. No one did. Until now. Henry stared at the ceiling. The lights above him flickered faintly. He was trying. He was, Gregory said simply. Henry looked down at his hands. And I didn't even know he existed. There it was, the unbearable truth. He had been so careful, so calculated, every deal, every risk measured. But somehow, the most important stake of his life, family, had slipped through his hands unnoticed. Or maybe he had refused to look. He stood up abruptly. What do we know about the woman who took Mila after Eric died? She's not in the system, Gregory replied. No ID, no custody records. Likely under the radar. Possibly part of a street-level network for child exploitation. Uses kids to panhandle. We're tracking her. Henry's jaw clenched. I want her found, Now. We're working on it. And when you do, Gregory raised a brow. Let the lawyers handle it? No, Henry said. Let me. Gregory didn't push back. There was a knock at the door. A hospital administrator peeked in. Mr. Cole? Sorry to interrupt. The judge signed off on your emergency guardianship. You're officially listed as Mila's temporary custodian. CPS has been notified, but since you're complying with the formal process, they're stepping back for now. Henry nodded, emotion flickering behind his otherwise calm expression. Thank you. The administrator hesitated. She's a lucky girl. Henry's gaze turned cold. No. I'm the one who's lucky. I just realized it too late. Back in the hospital room, Mila was awake again. Her cheeks were pink from sleep, and she was playing silently with the bear Dr. Patel had left for her. When Henry entered, she looked up. Did you come back again? I told you, he said, settling in beside her. I'm not going anywhere. She watched him for a moment. Are we going to your house now? Soon. They're finishing some papers first. Is it a big house? It's quiet, he said, but it's safe. Is there a room for me? He paused. There wasn't before, but there will be now. ADS. Mila smiled softly, then reached for the photo he'd left on the table, the one of Henry and Eric. She touched it carefully, one small finger tracing the corner where her father's smile still lived. Do you think he knew you were his dad? Henry couldn't speak. He just nodded. Do you think he was sad? He looked at her. Yes. But I think he was also proud. She rested her head against his arm. He said grown-ups don't always come back, but you did. Henry closed his eyes and whispered, I almost didn't. Mila's hand found his. But you're here now. He tightened his grip gently. Yes, he said. And I'm not going anywhere. Henry's townhouse sat tucked away on a quiet street in the Upper East Side, framed by ivy-wrapped gates and stoic stone lions perched on the corners of the marble steps. It was the kind of place that made people lower their voices when passing by, unsure if they belonged on the same sidewalk. Mila hesitated at the foot of the stairs. She held the hand of the man she still called Daddy, though no one had confirmed yet if that title would remain. She wore a clean hoodie now, navy blue, 2 sizes too big but warm, and her scraped knees peeked out from a donated hospital pair of jeans. In her other hand was the teddy bear. She gripped both like life rafts. Is this where you live? She asked, voice so soft it almost didn't make it through the autumn breeze. Henry nodded. It's home. Yours too, for now. Mila squinted at the massive front door. Are there other kids? No, just us. She frowned, then whispered. So, no one to share the pancakes with? Henry almost smiled. No one. You get every last one. Mila seemed unsure whether that was a good thing. Inside, the warmth of polished wood floors and soft lighting greeted them. The house was immaculate, every detail precisely where it was meant to be, cold, beautiful, untouched. But as they stepped into the entry hall, Henry saw it through her eyes for the first time. Too clean, too quiet, too empty. She didn't step in right away. Her fingers clenched tighter around his. Are you sure I can be here? She asked. Henry bent slightly, lowering his voice. Yes, but you don't have to rush. Take your time. They removed their shoes together. Mila lined hers up beside his, adjusting the right one 3 times until it looked just right. Then, finally, she stepped across the threshold. A housekeeper appeared from the hallway, Marjorie, in her late 60s, with silver-streaked hair tied in a perfect bun. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the girl. Henry gave her a subtle nod. Marjorie recovered instantly. Welcome home, Miss Mila, she said with a warm smile. Would you like a snack? Mila blinked. No adult had ever called her Miss anything. Henry spoke gently. Marjorie makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the state of New York. Mila still didn't answer. She just looked between them like she didn't trust it yet. I'll eat if you eat, she said finally. Henry nodded. Deal. They sat at the small kitchen table instead of the grand dining room. It was more lived in here. The hum of the old refrigerator, the soft ticking of the wall clock, the warm smell of cheddar melting in buttered bread. Mila sat on her knees to reach the table, napkin tucked carefully in her collar. She took small bites. always watching him. Halfway through the sandwich, she whispered, "Where's my room?" Henry set down his coffee cup. "It used to be someone else's, but now it's yours." Mila's eyes narrowed. "Was it your son's?" Henry inhaled. "Yes." She didn't seem bothered, just nodded, like that made sense. "Is he gone too?" "Yes," Henry said softly. 3 years ago. Did he get sick?" "No. It was an accident." Mila chewed slowly. "Is that why you look sad sometimes, even when you smile?" Henry stilled. She wasn't asking like a child looking for sympathy. She was asking like someone who had seen enough of sadness to know how to recognize it in other people. He looked at her. Maybe that's why." She nodded and took another bite. After lunch, Henry led her upstairs. She walked slowly, her fingertips grazing the banister like she needed to be sure it wouldn't disappear beneath her. He opened the door to the old guest room once meant for visiting family, now stripped bare except for a twin bed, a desk, and a small bookshelf. "It's not perfect yet," he said. "We'll fix it up together." Mila stepped inside cautiously. She didn't ask to touch anything. She just walked around the room once, made a small circle, then sat on the bed's edge. "I never had a bed with corners before." Henry frowned. "Corners? Like this?" She gestured at the clean angles of the frame. "Usually it's just a blanket on the floor." The words landed hard. Henry cleared his throat. "You can jump on this one, if you want." Mila looked scandalized. "But it's clean." He smiled faintly. "It'll still be clean after you jump." She didn't jump. Instead, she lay back slowly, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Henry stood in the doorway, unsure whether to stay or give her space. "You can go," she said quietly. "You want me to?" She hesitated. "No. But I don't want to ask you to stay. In case you go." Henry crossed the room and sat in the chair beside the desk. "I'll stay." They didn't speak again for a long time. That evening, Henry stood alone in his study, staring at a picture frame that hadn't been touched in years. A photo of a woman with laughing eyes, someone who had left long before the funeral. Long before the silence. His ex-wife, gone to Europe, remarried. She had never wanted children. Neither had he, back then, until Eric came knocking, until Mila arrived. Gregory called just after sunset. "She's been spotted." Henry's jaw tightened. "Where?" "Lower East Side. Corner of Broome and Eldridge. Same routine, 2 other kids. Rotating shifts, begging. 1 adult supervising." Henry didn't hesitate. "Get a team. I want her picked up, but quietly. No press." "We'll move tonight," Gregory said. "Are you sure you want to be involved in this part?" "I wasn't involved when Eric needed me," Henry replied. "I'll be damned if I'm absent again." When he returned to Mila's room later, she was asleep again, this time curled around a new blanket, her teddy bear between her knees. The nightlight glowed soft amber. Henry stood at the door for a moment, then walked in. He adjusted the blanket slightly, brushing a curl away from her face. She stirred. "Daddy, I'm here. Are you gonna stay this time?" He didn't pause. "Yes, I am." And for the first time since she'd arrived, Mila didn't double-check the answer. She just went back to sleep. The air outside Broome and Eldridge was thick with the city's after-dark rhythm sirens in the distance, the rumble of subway grates, and the quiet, uneasy shuffle of those trying to disappear. Gregory leaned against the unmarked sedan parked just off the alley. He checked his watch. 10:03 p.m. Inside the building across the street, the lights flickered. "We have visual," one of the operatives confirmed through the earpiece. "The woman's inside with 3 minors. Same one that took Mila." Henry sat in the back seat, still in his suit, tie loosened. His hands were steepled in front of his face, jaw locked. He wasn't the kind of man who liked being involved in logistics. His power moved through contracts and calls, not boots on the ground. But tonight, he wasn't Henry Cole, the billionaire. He was a man hunting justice for the child upstairs, sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. "Do we know her name yet?" he asked. Gregory nodded. "Tasha Price. Multiple aliases. 2 prior arrests, neglect, petty theft, possible trafficking ties. Nothing ever stuck. Slips through the cracks. Not this time." Henry's voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. The door across the street creaked open. The woman appeared, dragging a small boy by the arm while barking at another to stay close. Her voice echoed down the alley, shrill and sharp. The boy couldn't have been older than 6. Gregory's team moved in. 2 men in plain clothes flanked her without a word. One produced credentials, the other blocked her exit. The children were gently pulled aside. "Hey, you got no right," she began. Gregory stepped out of the shadows. "You remember Mila?" Her mouth clamped shut. "Yeah," he said, stepping closer. "She's safe now. And you're done." As she was handcuffed and read her rights, Henry finally stepped from the car. Their eyes met. Recognition flared in hers, and for the first time, fear. "You're her dad?" she spat. Henry didn't answer. "She cried for me, you know." She sneered. "Cried for me every night. I fed her, clothed her. That little brat wouldn't have lasted a day without me." Henry's voice was ice. "And you still let her bleed in front of strangers." Tasha lunged, restrained instantly by Gregory's team. "You rich pigs think you can buy everything," she hissed. Henry stepped closer, calm. "Not everything, but I can end what you started." She was shoved into the car and driven off without further noise. Gregory approached. "The kids will be taken in safely. We've already called family services. No press, no leaks." Henry nodded. "Make sure they don't vanish." "They won't." He looked up at the building, eyes narrowing. "You ever think," he said quietly, "that ghosts don't haunt places? They haunt decisions?" Gregory didn't respond. He didn't have to. The next morning, Henry sat across from Mila at the kitchen table again. She wore a yellow sweatshirt that Marjorie had laid out, sleeves rolled up, her curls pulled back with a pink ribbon she had chosen herself. Her plate was stacked with toast, strawberries, and tiny cut-up sausages. Henry had never thought of breakfast as anything more than fuel. Today, it felt sacred. Mila bit into her toast and spoke with a full mouth. "Can I go to school?" Henry blinked. "You want to?" She nodded. "I want to learn real stuff. Like how to write in cursive." He smiled. "You got a favorite subject?" "Reading. You're already ahead of most CEOs I know." Mila grinned, then hesitated. "Will they let me go? Even though I'm not like you?" Henry paused. "You mean because of your skin?" She nodded slowly. He leaned forward. "Mila, listen to me. Anyone who makes you feel less than because of your color, your past, your pain is someone who's afraid of what you'll become when you know your worth." She didn't fully understand, not yet. But she smiled, because she understood him. "Can you read with me?" He reached for the book she handed him, The Velveteen Rabbit. She climbed onto his lap before he could open it. He didn't mind. They read slowly, with her finger pointing to each word. When they reached the line that read, "Once you are real, you can't become unreal again. It lasts for always." She looked up at him. "Am I real now?" Henry touched her cheek gently. "You always were." That afternoon, Marion Hayes arrived at the townhouse with 2 thick folders and 3 paralegals. She had practiced family law for 30 years. But even she was stunned when Henry Cole, the coldest executive in New York real estate, had called her personally. She reviewed the guardianship paperwork, pre-filled the adoption forms, and laid out the steps with mechanical efficiency. Henry signed everything. No hesitation. "You're taking this seriously," she noted. He looked at Mila, who was in the corner braiding Marjorie's scarf around her bear's neck. "I don't do anything halfway," he said. "Not anymore." Marion smiled. "Well, let's make it official." She opened a folder and slid over a pen. Henry picked it up and paused over the line. "Petitioner requests full parental custody of minor child, Mila Rose Carter." "Carter?" he asked. "It was the last name on her hospital band," Marion said. "Eric must have used it as an alias. She has no formal birth certificate. We'll have to re-register her." Henry stared at the name. Carter. Eric Carter. He'd never known the boy's last name. Had never asked. He signed the form. Under parental name, he wrote, Henry Cole. That evening, as the city lit up in its usual golden shimmer, Mila sat in the guest room, which was slowly becoming her room, drawing with a set of colored pencils Henry had brought home himself. He watched her from the doorway. "What are you drawing?" he asked. She held it up. It was a house. With a tree. 2 stick figures in front. One tall, one small. Underneath, in careful, uneven handwriting, it said, "Me and Daddy. Home." Henry stepped in, knelt beside her, and kissed her forehead. "That's the best thing I've ever seen," he whispered. And this time, he didn't just mean the drawing. 2 weeks had passed. In that time, Henry Cole had signed more paperwork than he had during his last 3 mergers combined. Emergency guardianship became formal. Court hearings were scheduled. Mila's room was painted a pale green, her choice, because it feels like leaves and sun, she said. She had picked the comforter herself, white, with little yellow stars. He bought it without blinking. Each day, she grew a little more into the space, still cautious, still asking for permission to touch framed photos or sit on the couch, but the tremble in her voice was fading. Slowly, she was replacing fear with familiarity. And Henry was changing too. He didn't go into the office. Not once. He conducted calls from home, but only after breakfast with Mila, and only after helping her tie her sneakers, 1 loop at a time. Now, on a crisp Tuesday morning, he stood in the admissions office of a small private school on the Upper West Side. Mila clung to his hand, dressed in a navy jumper and white-collared shirt. The sleeves were too long. Her backpack was nearly bigger than she was, but she looked up at him with that same questioning gaze she gave him every morning. "You sure they'll let me in?" she whispered. Henry squeezed her hand. "They'd be lucky to have you." The school's headmaster entered, an older black woman named Mrs. Cynthia Holloway. Her voice was warm, but there was steel beneath it. "Mr. Cole," she said, shaking his hand. "And this must be Mila." Mila looked down. "Hi, would you like to see your classroom?" Mila looked up at Henry. He nodded. "Go ahead, I'll be right here." Mrs. Holloway extended a hand. "Come on, sweetheart." Action. Mila hesitated, then let go of Henry's hand and followed. He watched her go. The way she walked a little straighter, the way her fingers still fidgeted at her sides. She'd lived a life of looking over her shoulder. Now, he hoped, she'd start learning to look ahead. Mrs. Holloway returned 10 minutes later. "She's quiet," she said, "but she listens, observes everything." She helped a boy tie his shoes without being asked. Henry exhaled softly. "That sounds like her." Mrs. Holloway tilted her head. "She told me you weren't her first daddy, but you're her real one." Henry's chest tightened. "Did she say anything else?" "She said when she first came to live with you, her tummy stopped hurting every night." He looked down, blinking once. "She doesn't know her alphabet perfectly," Mrs. Holloway continued, "and her reading level is behind. But she's smart. You can tell. And resilient." Henry nodded. "She's a fighter." Mrs. Holloway studied him for a moment. "You know, I've had wealthy men donate to this school before, but none have walked in here holding their daughter's hand." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he said, simply, "I wasn't always that man." "Well," she replied, smiling gently, "now you are." Later that day, Henry took Mila to the park. It had become part of their rhythm now after school. After lunch, a slow walk down to Central Park, where she could climb, run, and forget everything that came before. He stayed close. He always stayed close. She ran between trees, her laughter bouncing between the branches, her hair catching the wind. Henry sat on a nearby bench, watching her play. 2 older women across from him murmured. Then one leaned over. "She's yours?" He nodded. "She's lovely." Henry smiled. "Thank you." The woman hesitated. "Forgive me. It's just not something you see every day." He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. A rich white man, a little black girl, sitting together like family. He didn't need their validation, but he appreciated the curiosity wasn't wrapped in judgment this time. When Mila came running back with a pine cone in each hand, she shouted, "Daddy, look what I found." Henry held out his hand, took the pine cone like it was treasure. "That's a fine one." The women across the bench smiled, and for the first time in his life, Henry realized he was sitting somewhere where his name wasn't feared. He wasn't Mr. Cole. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't a calculation. He was just a man. With his daughter, that night, after dinner, Mila asked a question. "Can I have a picture of Daddy Eric?" Henry looked up from his laptop. "You want to put it in your room?" She nodded. "Next to ours." He stood, walked over to the bookshelf, and pulled down a leather folder. Inside were a few saved photographs Gregory had found, pulled from shelters, old IDs, even one blurry Polaroid from a donation center in the Bronx. He handed her one. It showed Eric, younger, maybe mid-20s, holding Mila as a baby. His eyes were tired but proud, his smile uneven, unsure. She took it reverently. "Do you think he's proud of me?" she asked. Henry knelt beside her. "I think he was proud of you every second of his life." She pressed the photo to her chest. "I want to be good," she whispered, "so he can see me." Henry hugged her tightly. "You already are." She looked up. "Do you think he'd like you?" Henry smiled faintly. "I hope so. I think he'd be glad you have someone who will never leave." She nodded. "Even when I get messy?" He kissed her hair. "Especially then." As she drifted to sleep that night, the photo tucked beside her bed, Henry watched the rise and fall of her chest beneath the covers. He was learning, day by day, what it meant to stay. And for once, staying didn't feel like punishment. It felt like purpose. Henry stood in the doorway of what used to be his son's bedroom. It had been untouched for nearly 3 years. The bed had stayed made, the shelves dusted weekly by staff under strict instruction, but nothing had been added, removed, or adjusted. Not since the accident. Not since the night Henry got the call and stood frozen in his hallway for hours, unable to cross the threshold into a world that had belonged to a boy he had barely known. Now, Mila stood in the same doorway, one hand clutching the teddy bear she carried everywhere, the other curled around the frame like she needed its support to face what was inside. "Is this your son's room?" she asked. Henry nodded, quiet. It was. She didn't step inside right away. She looked up at him first. "Can I see it?" He offered his hand. She took it, and together they crossed the invisible line between past and present. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old linen. The curtains were drawn back, letting golden morning light pour over the bed still made with a navy comforter and a single pillow. Baseball posters clung to the walls, along with a few yellowing sticky notes above the desk. Scribbled quotes, math reminders, and one small drawing that said, "Dad, don't forget our game 6 p.m. sharp." Henry looked away. Mila, meanwhile, moved like she was in a museum, her feet barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. She paused at the bookshelf, where dog-eared copies of Hatchet and the Giver sat beside a row of neatly arranged figurines. She ran her fingers along the spines. Was he kind? Henry cleared his throat. Yes, very. Did he laugh a lot? Henry smiled, pained. He had a big, loud laugh, the kind that made everyone else laugh too. Mila touched one of the books gently. "Do you miss him?" "Every day." She nodded solemnly. "Do you think he'd be mad if I used his room?" Henry knelt beside her. "No," he said softly. "I think he'd want someone brave to live here. Someone good. Like me? Exactly like you." She bit her lip, thinking. Then, with a small breath of courage, she climbed onto the bed. The mattress creaked softly beneath her weight. She sat still for a moment, as if waiting for something bad to happen. When it didn't, she smiled. "I like it here," she said. "It feels strong." Nod. Henry felt the words land deep. She wasn't wrong. This room had seen pain, yes, but it had also seen love, potential, dreams. Maybe it could see them again. That afternoon, Henry went to his office for the first time in weeks. His assistant nearly dropped her coffee when he walked through the glass doors. "Mr. Cole." We weren't expecting you." "I won't be long," he said, already heading toward the elevator. Inside the executive suite, the walls were as he'd left them. Modern, minimalist, sterile. The view of Manhattan stretched like a painting behind his desk. He sat down, but didn't log into his computer. Instead, he pulled out a photo, the same one Mila had kept by her bedside, and placed it beside a new frame. A candid shot from the park last weekend. Mila mid-laugh. crumbs on her cheek, eyes wide with joy. Eric and Mila, side by side, father and daughter, and now, his family. He looked at the two images and said aloud to the empty room, "I should have opened that door." Gregory entered quietly a moment later. "You're here early." Henry didn't look up. "I came to pack." Gregory blinked. "Pack?" Henry stood, taking only a single folder from his desk. "I'm not coming back. Not the same way, anyway." "You're retiring?" "I'm changing," Henry said. "And the company's going to have to change with me." Gregory studied him. "This about Mila? It's about everything I missed. I don't want to keep missing it." He glanced out the window. "Turns out, building towers doesn't mean much if there's no one in them who calls you home." Gregory didn't argue. That night, Mila was curled up on the couch, watching the Iron Giant with a blanket around her shoulders. Her head rested on Henry's arm. Halfway through the movie, she spoke without turning her head. "Was your son scared?" Henry paused the movie. When he went away." Henry took a slow breath. "I don't think so. He was brave. Like you." She looked up. "Do you think he's with my daddy?" "I like to think they're watching together." She nodded, satisfied. "I hope they're not too mad," she said, "about me using the room." "They're not mad." She closed her eyes. "Okay. I just don't want anyone to think I stole it." Henry wrapped the blanket tighter around her. "No one will ever take anything from you again. Not on my watch." She smiled sleepily. "Promise?" He kissed her hair. "Promise." As she drifted off, the television flickering softly in the background, Henry leaned back and looked at the framed photos on the mantel. Eric, his son, and now Mila. 3 names, 3 lives, woven into one second chance. The conference room on the 48th floor of Cole International was built for intimidation: glass walls, a skyline backdrop, and a table long enough to seat the most powerful men and women in Manhattan real estate. For decades, Henry Cole had ruled this room with a glance, his word final, his reputation carved into polished walnut and reinforced steel. But today, he entered the room not as a titan but as a father. The partners were already seated, murmuring quietly as he approached. Suits pressed, ties straightened, iPads aglow with reports and projections. But every conversation stopped when Henry stepped in. His presence hadn't diminished, even if his priorities had shifted. He took the seat at the head of the table, calmly unbuttoning his blazer. "You're here," said Trevor Wills, a senior partner with salt and pepper hair and a sharp voice that usually preceded criticism. "We weren't sure you still considered yourself active." "I am," Henry said, "but not in the way you think." Trevor leaned forward. "There's concern, Henry. The board hasn't seen a quarterly projection in weeks. You missed the Zurich merger meeting. Investors are nervous." Henry didn't flinch. "Let them be." A pause followed. Then another voice, Mara Chang, VP of Legal, cut in with careful tone. "There's also the matter of your guardianship filings. It's public record now. The media's been slow to pick it up, but if it breaks..." "It already has," Henry said. "I released the statement myself this morning." Whispers flared around the table. Trevor looked stunned. "You, what?" "I told them the truth," Henry continued, "that a young girl entered my life unexpectedly. That she's family. That I am seeking full custody. And that I will no longer tolerate the perception that empathy is a weakness. This company was built on precision, not sentiment." Trevor shot back. "This company," Henry replied evenly, "was built by a man who thought power made him untouchable. That same man missed the chance to meet his son until it was too late." The room fell into an uneasy silence. "Eric," Henry said, his voice lower. "His name was Eric. He was mine. I never claimed him. Not when he knocked on my door at 20. Not when he begged for a meeting 5 years later. And now he's gone. But he left behind a daughter, and I will not fail her." Trevor shifted in his seat. This is a private matter, Henry." "No," Henry said. "It's personal. And that's different. Personal is what you take with you when the office lights shut off. Personal is what you remember when your title doesn't matter anymore." He stood slowly, placing a folder on the table. "In this folder," he continued, "are documents appointing Mara as interim CEO. I'll remain in an advisory role. My priorities have changed, but the company's foundation won't shift. I've ensured continuity. You have nothing to panic about. Mara's eyebrows rose. Henry, are you sure? Never been more. He looked at Trevor, whose face had paled. And for the record, Henry added, if this company can't survive the presence of a child in my life, then it was never strong to begin with. When Henry returned home later that afternoon, the first thing he heard was laughter. Not TV laughter. Not the polite, social kind either. Real, unfiltered, child's laughter. It was coming from the guest room, her room now. He walked quietly toward it and peeked through the door. Mila was on the floor with Marjorie, surrounded by building blocks and stuffed animals. She was mid-story, gesturing wildly as the bear rescued the dinosaur from a collapsing tower. And then Daddy Bear said, "Don't be afraid. I'm not going anywhere." Henry froze. Marjorie saw him first and smiled gently. Mila turned, bright-eyed. "Daddy," he smiled, stepping inside. "What's going on in here?" "Emergency," she declared. Mr. Dino was stuck under the blanket cave, but I saved him, and Daddy Bear helped. "Well," he said, crouching, "sounds like I missed some very important heroics." Mila crawled into his lap without hesitation. "Did you have a big meeting today?" Henry nodded. "I did. Did you win?" "I didn't need to." She tilted her head. "Then what happened?" "I made a decision. A big one." She leaned forward. "Was it scary?" "A little." "Right. But you did it." He kissed the top of her head. "Yes. Because of you." She beamed. "Because I'm brave?" He smiled. "Because we're brave." That evening, Henry stood in front of the fireplace, holding a glass of water, no scotch, no wine. He hadn't touched alcohol in weeks. Mila was upstairs, brushing her teeth, singing quietly to herself, off-key and joyful. Gregory stood nearby, reviewing documents. "You sure you want to let Mara run the company?" he asked. "She's earned it," Henry replied. "And I want Mila to know me as something more than a name on a building." Gregory nodded slowly. "You're not afraid they'll forget who built it?" Henry looked up at the mantel, where a new photo now sat Mila, drawing with sidewalk chalk, grinning up at him. "No," he said. "They'll remember. But more importantly, she will." Gregory watched him for a long moment. "Truth is," he said finally, "I never thought I'd see you like this." "Neither did I." Was it Cries and Frentine's ires? Henry set the glass down. "But I'm glad I did." From upstairs, Mila called out, "Daddy, you forgot bedtime story." Henry smiled. "No," he said softly, already moving. "I'm right on time." The first storm of November rolled in early that morning, the kind of East Coast gray that hung heavy in the sky like an omen. Rain whispered against the windows of the townhouse, and Mila stood quietly in front of the large living room window, one palm pressed to the glass. "She's out there," she whispered. Henry turned from the kitchen, where he was preparing a late breakfast. "Who is?" "The lady who used to yell at me." Her voice was barely audible. "She doesn't like the cold. Her fingers always turned purple." Henry set the spatula down and crossed to her. "You don't have to think about her anymore," he said gently. Mila didn't move. "But what if she finds me?" Henry crouched down beside her. "She won't." "She might," Mila insisted. "She found me every time. Even when Eric tried to hide me, she always found me." He looked into her eyes, too young to carry so much fear. "You're safe here," he said. "This house has strong locks, and stronger people." Mila frowned. "But you're not always here." "I am now," he said. "And even when I'm not right next to you, you're never alone." She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned against him, her small body trembling slightly. He held her, letting the silence do the work. At the precinct, Gregory stood in the corner of a sterile room, watching through the one-way glass. On the other side of the mirror sat Tasha Price, arms crossed, lips pursed, eyes simmering with defiance. Her lawyer sat beside her, fidgeting nervously with a pen. "She's still not talking," Gregory said, into his earpiece. Henry's voice came through. "What's she waiting for?" "A headline," Gregory muttered. "Or a price." Henry's silence said everything. The detective on the other side of the mirror leaned in, voice even. We have you on surveillance. Eyewitnesses. Statements from 3 children. There's nowhere to run this time. Tasha rolled her eyes. Yeah? And what do I get if I talk? The detective didn't blink. You get less time. Maybe. Tasha leaned forward, sneering. I want a deal. And I want him to know I'm not afraid of him. Gregory stepped away from the glass. She wants to be famous, he said. Henry responded calmly. Then don't give her that. Back at the townhouse, Henry found Mila sitting cross-legged on the rug in her room, building a tower from books, blocks, and stuffed animals. What's that? He asked. A fortress. For what? In case she comes back. Henry sat beside her. You really think this will stop her? No, Mila said honestly, but it makes me feel better. He nodded slowly. Can I help? She handed him a stuffed giraffe. Only if you're good at defense. I've been in boardrooms for 30 years, he smirked. Defense is my specialty. They built together for almost an hour. Mila gave each toy a title. Commander Bunny, General Bear, Sergeant Dino. She was meticulous in placing them. You know, Henry said. Fortresses are strong. But sometimes, the best protection is someone standing in front of you. Like a shield? Exactly. Would you be my shield? He didn't hesitate. Always. She looked at him. Eyes wide. Even if she's yelling? Even if she's stronger? He brushed a curl from her forehead. She can scream all she wants. I've faced worse than screams. And she'll never get to you again. Mila looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, Okay. That night, the wind howled through the streets. Lightning danced along the horizon. Henry sat up reading while Mila slept beside him. Her fingers curled into his sleeve, the photo of Eric under her pillow. At 2:13 a.m., Henry's phone buzzed. Gregory. He stepped out into the hallway to answer. She's flipped, Gregory said. Started talking 10 minutes ago. Henry rubbed his eyes. What changed? She saw your press release. The part where you said Mila was your daughter now. I think it rattled her. She realized she doesn't scare anyone anymore. What did she say? Enough to open an old file, Gregory said. Turns out, Eric wasn't the only one she worked. There were other kids, other payments, possibly a ring. We're digging, and we may need your help to open a few doors. Henry didn't hesitate. Send me everything. And Henry? Yes? You might want to be careful. She still talks like someone who's lost control and might try to get it back. Henry's voice was steel. Let her try. The next morning, Mila woke to the smell of cinnamon and butter. She padded downstairs in fuzzy socks, rubbing her eyes. Henry was in the kitchen, flipping French toast. A plate already waited for her, dusted with powdered sugar and shaped like a bear's face. Marjorie had even made cocoa, marshmallows bobbing like tiny clouds. Mila sat at the table, still half asleep, and whispered, Thanks, Daddy. He looked over his shoulder. Always. She took a bite and sighed contentedly, but before she could swallow, her small voice broke through the peace. Daddy? Yes. If she came back, and she tried to take me, Henry turned to her fully now. I won't let her. But if she lies, I'll tell the truth louder. But if she hurts me, she won't. His voice was steady, absolute. You're not a secret anymore, Mila. You're not lost. You're mine. She stared at him, marshmallow stuck to her lip, and whispered, Okay. She believed him, because in that moment, she realized something more powerful than her fear. Storms had names too, but so did shields. The headlines came that Thursday morning, sweeping across every news feed and television screen in New York like a controlled fire. But this time, Henry had lit the match himself. Billionaire Henry Cole seeks full custody of daughter of deceased street musician. From towers to toy boxes, the new life of real estate tycoon Henry Cole. Family or facade? The story behind Cole's sudden transformation. The media didn't know what to make of it. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others whispered about guilt, a fall from power, or a late life breakdown. But none of them had sat across from Mila at breakfast, watching her cut her pancakes into tiny stars so no bite would be left behind. None of them had heard her call him daddy like she'd always meant to. Henry had expected judgment. What he hadn't expected was silence. At least, not from his enemies. It was his friends who fell quiet. At the Barclay Club, where Henry had been a member for nearly 2 decades, he found himself alone at the table he used to share with 4 other men. Founders, tycoons, men whose opinions shaped skyscrapers and elections. Henry, one of them had said earlier that week, swirling a glass of brandy. "You've always been calculated. But this is messy." "Children are messy," Henry replied, "but so is healing." Another leaned in. "Look, we all have regrets, but you've taken in someone else's mistake and made it yours." Henry looked at them for a long time. Then he stood. "She's not a mistake," he said. "She's the first thing I've ever gotten right." He never returned to the club after that. Meanwhile, across the city, in the classrooms and cafes and crowded sidewalks, something else was happening. People read the headlines and didn't roll their eyes. They paused, because it wasn't just about a billionaire adopting a poor black girl. It was about a man admitting he had failed and choosing to change. It was about a child who had survived hell, and now had a bedroom with painted stars on the ceiling and a window that didn't need bars. It was about justice not in a courtroom, but in the quiet moments of choice. At school, Mila noticed it too. Her classmates, many of them used to whispering about her clothes, her skin, her silence, now asked to sit beside her. Some asked questions, curious but kind. One girl even handed her a drawing of 2 stick figures and a rainbow, labeled Mila and her new dad. Mrs. Holloway called Henry that afternoon. "She smiled today," she said. "A real one." Henry smiled back, even though she couldn't see it. "She's starting to believe the good stuff stays." That evening, Henry sat with Mila on the living room floor. They were piecing together a 1,000-piece puzzle, a snow-covered lighthouse against a navy sky. Mila liked puzzles. She said they made her feel like the world could fit together if you were patient enough. "I saw my name today," she said suddenly. "In the newspaper?" She nodded. "A girl showed me at recess." Henry stiffened slightly. "And what did you think?" Mila picked up a puzzle piece and twirled it between her fingers. It was weird, like my story wasn't mine anymore. Henry reached over and took the piece from her, placing it perfectly into a corner. "I know the feeling. I was seat. Did they lie?" "No," he said. "But they didn't tell the whole truth either." "What's the whole truth?" "That you're not a headline. You're a heartbeat." She looked at him, unsure. He smiled. "That means you're the center of something real, something alive. Not a thing to talk about, but a person to love." Mila tilted her head. "Does that mean they don't get to decide who I am?" "Exactly." She nodded. "Good. She won president." They returned to the puzzle in silence, the lighthouse beginning to take shape between their hands. Later that night, after Mila had gone to bed, Henry sat on the rooftop terrace. The city glittered below, oblivious and infinite. For years, this view had made him feel powerful. Tonight, it made him feel small, but in a good way. Gregory joined him, holding 2 mugs of black coffee. "You've made some waves," he said. "I know. You're not exactly making it easy on the PR team." Henry took a sip. "I'm not here to be easy. I'm here to be right." Gregory chuckled. "I got a call from a judge today. Said your guardianship hearing's been moved up. Apparently someone high up put in a word." Henry arched a brow. "Friend of yours?" Gregory shrugged. "Friend of someone Mila helped at school." "Word spreads, Henry. So does truth." They sat in silence a moment longer. Then Gregory added, "You sure you're ready for the next chapter?" "I'm not sure of anything," Henry admitted. "But she is, and sometimes that was enough." The courthouse stood like a monument to everything Henry had once believed in: structure, order, power. And yet, as he stepped through the heavy doors with Mila's tiny hand in his, it didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a proving ground. Marion Hayes met them at the security checkpoint, a leather-bound portfolio clutched in one hand, her other holding a scarf tight against the November wind. She smiled at Mila first. "You ready, little one?" Mila looked up, eyes wide but brave. "Will they ask if I want to stay?" "They might," Marion said gently, "and it's okay to say how you feel." Mila nodded, her hand tightening around Henry's. Inside, the family court was quieter than the other chambers, less dramatic than TV would suggest. Still, the weight of what happened inside these walls could rewrite entire lives. They were led to a small waiting room, pastel-colored chairs, tissue boxes on every table. Mila whispered, "Is this where people get in trouble?" "No," Henry said softly. "This is where people get second chances." Their case was scheduled for 10:45 a.m. sharp. Judge Margaret Fulton, age 67, was known for being fair but not forgiving. Her record was clean, her stare cutting. She had seen too many broken families to be easily impressed. She scanned the documents before her as Henry and Marion approached the table. "And where is the child now?" she asked. Marion nodded toward the second row. "She's seated with Miss Marjorie Green, Your Honor." Judge Fulton peered over her glasses. Her eyes softened slightly when she saw Mila sitting quietly, back straight, hands folded over the bear in her lap. "You're Mila?" the judge asked. Mila stood up nervously. "Yes, ma'am. Do you know why you're here today?" Mila glanced at Henry, then back at the judge. "To see if I can stay with my daddy." "Do you want to stay with him?" Mila's chin lifted. "I need to." There was a silence that spread through the courtroom like spilled ink. Judge Fulton leaned back, lips tight, but her gaze lingered on the girl. "I've read the reports," she said. "Unorthodox beginnings. Questionable legal trail. A tragic history." Henry didn't flinch. "But also," she continued, "a stable environment now. A consistent caregiver. Emotional growth in the child, and surprisingly, a willingness from the petitioner to fully commit to long-term custody and emotional support." "I don't do things halfway, Your Honor," Henry said calmly. Judge Fulton looked at him. "No, Mr. Cole, you don't." There was a pause. "Do you understand what it means?" she asked. "To be her legal parent not just in name, but in every way? Through scraped knees, nightmares, first heartbreaks, and college applications?" Henry's voice was steady. "Yes, ma'am. Do you understand that this child is not an accessory, not a project, not an atonement?" "I do." The judge leaned forward. "Then I'll ask you what I rarely ask in this courtroom, Mr. Cole. Why?" Henry looked at Mila, then back at the judge. "Because I was given a second chance," he said. "By a little girl who didn't even know what that meant. Because she trusted me before I'd earned it. Because love doesn't come when you deserve it. It comes when you show up for it." He paused. "And because if I fail her, then I fail everything that ever mattered." The courtroom was still. Even the stenographer blinked back a tear. Judge Fulton looked down at her papers, then signed her name with a slow, deliberate stroke. "I hereby grant full and permanent custody of Mila Rose Carter to Mr. Henry James Cole." Mila gasped. Henry smiled. He didn't pump a fist. He didn't sigh with relief. He simply stood, walked over to the row, and knelt in front of the girl who had taught him what family meant. "It's official," he said. "Does that mean I'm really yours now?" she whispered. "You always were." She jumped into his arms. Behind them, the judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole," he turned. "One last thing." "Yes, Your Honor?" She smiled, just a hint. "Don't screw it up." Outside the courthouse, the wind had softened. Mila walked beside Henry, swinging his hand back and forth. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "It's November." "Hot chocolate, then?" He grinned. "Deal." As they approached the car, a woman called out from across the street. "Mr. Cole." Henry turned. It was a journalist, young, out of breath, a press badge swinging from her neck. "Do you have a comment about today's ruling?" Henry looked down at Mila, then back at the reporter. "Yes," he said. "Tell them this." She raised her recorder. "Tell them justice isn't just what happens in court. Sometimes, it's what happens in a child's heart when she finally hears the word home and believes it." The reporter blinked. Henry opened the door for Mila, helped her in, and climbed in after her. As the car pulled away, Mila whispered, "Daddy?" "Yes." "Do we have to tell everybody?" "No," he said. "Just the people who matter." She leaned against him. "Well, I think you matter." Henry smiled. "That's the best headline I've ever heard." It had been 2 weeks since the courtroom, but Henry noticed something he hadn't before, not just the change in Mila, but in himself. He laughed more now. He didn't bark orders at waiters or snap at late phone calls. His staff noticed, too. Marjorie started calling him Henry instead of Mr. Cole when they were alone, an unspoken sign that he was finally joining the rest of the human race. But not everyone welcomed the change. At the office, Trevor Wills had requested a meeting. In person. "I'll be home by 4, Henry told Mila that morning as he helped button her coat. She squinted at him. "Promise?" He crouched to her level. "Pinky, swear." "Ubret." She hooked her pinky around his, and just before heading to school, she turned and said, "You don't have to smile all the time, Daddy, but I like it when you do." He smiled then, just for her, and then he left. Trevor waited in Henry's former office, now Mara's, though the plaque hadn't been changed yet. He sat like he always had. Too stiff. Too polished. Like a man clinging to a ship already taking on water. "You're here," Henry said, stepping inside. "Clearly. Henry took a seat across from him, noting the way Trevor didn't offer a handshake. "So," Henry said, "how's the company holding up without me? Profits are stable. Your transition plan is working. And yet," Henry added, "you're here." Trevor didn't waste time. "People are talking, Henry. Shareholders, clients. Your name's being associated with social work and charity foundations. Not real estate. Not leadership." Henry smiled faintly. "And what exactly are you afraid of, Trevor? That I'll make decency look good?" Trevor leaned in. "No. That you'll make it look trendy. Like it's a phase. And when it ends, the fallout will bury us all." Henry's jaw tightened. "This isn't a phase," he said. "This is the rest of my life. You're throwing away legacy." Henry stood. "No. I'm redefining it." Trevor scoffed. "You used to be feared." Henry looked out the window, toward the horizon where the city met the sky. "I used to be lonely, Trevor. There's a difference." He turned back to him. "Legacy isn't about your name being on buildings. It's about whether anyone whispers it at bedtime." Trevor blinked. "I don't expect you to understand," Henry added, "but I do expect you to get out of the way." That afternoon, Henry arrived at Mila's school 5 minutes early. He stood near the playground fence, watching her play with 2 girls from her class. They took turns jumping rope while another counted. Mila was laughing. Not the careful kind, the loud, unguarded kind. Mrs. Holloway approached him quietly. "She's different now," she said. "Freer. She's home now," Henry replied. Mrs. Holloway smiled. "And you? Are you different?" He thought about it. "Yes," he said. "I used to check my watch when people talked too long. Now, I forget I'm wearing one." She chuckled. "That's progress." The bell rang. Kids scattered. Mila ran to him. "Daddy!" she cried. "You're early. E2. Told you I would be. Can we go to the bookstore today? I want to find the next story about the dragon who gets adopted." He laughed. "Is that a series now?" "Everything's a series if you want it to be," she said seriously. He opened the car door for her. "Then let's go find your dragon." Later that evening, they stopped by Eric's old block. Mila asked to see it again, not to cry, just to look. The building was quieter now, cleaner. One of the neighbors had started a mural on the side of Phoenix, wings wide, painted by local teens. "That's new," Henry said. Mila stood still, studying it. "That's what he was, huh?" "Who?" "My dad, Eric. He burned and came back, even if just for me." Henry looked at her. "You're part of that too." She stepped closer to the wall. A small white corner near the bottom had been left blank. She turned to him. "Can I write something?" Henry looked around, then back at her. "What do you want it to say?" She thought for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "Tell them he mattered." Henry reached into his coat, pulled out a pen, and handed it to her. Her handwriting was shaky, but the message was clear. He mattered. She signed it with a simple heart. That night, Mila fell asleep early, curled beside the bear Henry had repaired 3 times now. The house was quiet. Henry stepped into his study, poured a glass of water, and looked at the framed photo of Eric, the one where he held baby Mila with a pride that refused to fade, even in death. "You did good, kid," Henry whispered. "And I'm trying." The man who had once forgotten how to smile was now raising a girl who reminded him every day that love wasn't a threat, it was the reason. It started like any ordinary Saturday. Mila sat at the breakfast table in her oversized hoodie. slathering peanut butter onto pancakes with a precision Henry found both alarming and impressive. Marjorie hummed from the kitchen, flipping bacon and sipping coffee between turns. Henry sipped his own cup, the newspaper folded neatly beside him. Unread. "Can we go to the planetarium today?" Mila asked, eyes hopeful. Henry glanced at the calendar. "Weren't we going to paint birdhouses? Birds don't float in space, Daddy." "To that," he chuckled. "I stand corrected." Just as Mila poured syrup with dramatic flair, the doorbell rang. Henry checked his watch. 9:07 a.m. Odd. He opened the front door to find Gregory standing there. Not in his usual suit, but a gray jacket, wind-blown hair, and a manila folder tucked under his arm. "This early?" Henry asked, stepping aside. Gregory's face told him everything. This wasn't a social visit. "Sorry," Gregory said quietly. "But we found something." Henry stiffened. "Involving Tasha?" Gregory nodded. "And Eric." They sat in the study while Mila painted constellations on a cardboard box spaceship in the living room. The door stayed cracked open, Henry insisted. Gregory laid the folder on the desk. "It turns out," he began, "Eric wasn't just protecting Mila from Tasha. He was trying to get her out of something much worse." Henry opened the folder. Photos, notes, a list of names. Gregory continued, voice low. "There's evidence that Tasha was connected to a network of people who placed vulnerable children for private caretaking off-the-record arrangements. Cash only. No oversight." Mila was on that list. Henry's jaw clenched. "They were shopping her around like property." Gregory said. "Eric found out. That's why he disappeared for a time. He was hiding her." Henry looked at one document, a payment record with Mila's initials, and a transaction dated just a week before Eric's death. "I don't believe in coincidences anymore," Henry said. Gregory shook his head. "Neither do I." Henry closed the folder, fists tight. "And now," he asked, "what happens to the others?" "We're building a case," Gregory said. "It could take time, years even, but you've given us something real to start with." Henry stood and paced toward the window, anger simmering in his chest. "All those kids." Gregory didn't respond. He didn't need to. Henry turned. "They'll come after her, won't they? Maybe not directly. But if any of them catch wind that you're digging, they'll want to discredit you, or scare you off." Henry's voice was cold steel. "Let them try." Later that afternoon, Henry found Mila on the rooftop terrace, lying inside her cardboard spaceship, with her bear strapped in beside her. "Commander Carter," he said, saluting. "Do you copy?" She looked up and giggled. "Mission status, safe. All systems go. Is 2-9. May I enter the vessel? Only if you bring snacks." He held up a bag of apple slices and a juice box. "Permission granted," she declared. He sat beside her, careful not to crush any of the painted stars. They looked up at the real sky, faint behind the city haze. "Do you think people get scared when they go to space?" she asked suddenly. "I'm sure they do," he said. "Why?" "Because even when you leave the world behind," he answered, "you still carry everything that matters with you." "Mine." She thought for a second. "That's heavy." "It is," he smiled, "but it also keeps you grounded." "Even in space?" "Even in space." They lay in silence for a moment. Then Mila whispered, "Were there other girls like me?" Henry didn't answer right away. "Yes," he said finally. "There were." She turned to him. "Will you help them too?" He met her eyes. "I will." She nodded once, solemn. "Good. Because nobody else did." It's see. That night, after Mila had gone to bed, Henry stood alone in Eric's old room, the one Mila now called hers. He looked around at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the book she had left open on her pillow, the drawing of her and Henry taped to the closet door. He thought of the other children, the other names in the file, the silence they lived in, the fear, the neglect, and he realized something. He had found his purpose, not just to be her father, but to be their voice. For every child who had been tossed aside and told they were unworthy, for every Eric who had died protecting someone else's hope, he would speak, and when necessary, he would roar. It was a Thursday when the phone call came. Not the kind of day that announces itself with warning signs or ominous clouds. Just a regular day with grocery lists and school pickup and the usual dance of ordinary things. Marjorie answered the house line, a habit she'd never broken, and called for Henry with a voice that trembled more than usual. "There's someone on the line," she said softly. "Says he knows something about Eric. About the night he died." Henry took the phone with quiet caution. "This is Henry Cole." The voice on the other end was raspy, uncertain. "I wasn't gonna say anything," the man began. "But I saw the girl. In the papers. And I knew I couldn't hold it anymore." "Who is this?" "Name's Lenny. I worked janitorial at the Granger building. Night shift. 2 years ago, I was cleaning the back alley around 3 a.m. That's when I saw it. Saw him." Now, Henry's grip on the phone tightened. "Saw who?" "Your son," Lenny said. "Eric. He was bleeding, trying to carry the little girl. Said someone was coming. Told me to run. I didn't help. I ran like a coward." Henry's voice dropped low. "Do you know who was after him?" "I didn't then. But now I think I do. I saw the face of the woman who showed up a minute later. Same one from the papers now. The social worker. Tasha." Silence fell between them. "I should have done something," Lenny whispered. "You just did," Henry said. An hour later, Henry sat across from Gregory in his apartment, the city humming below them. "This changes the timeline," Gregory said, flipping through notes. "If Tasha was there that night, and Eric was trying to get Mila out, this could elevate the charges. We're not just chasing proof anymore," Henry said. "We're chasing a pattern." Gregory nodded. "And patterns leave trails." Henry stared out the window, his voice hardening. "Then we follow every damn one of them." And again. At school, Mila was quieter than usual. Mrs. Holloway noticed the difference, her posture more slouched, her laugh more restrained. After art class, she gently pulled Mila aside. "Everything okay?" Mila shrugged. Mrs. Holloway knelt. "You can tell me anything." Mila fiddled with the hem of her shirt. "Sometimes I think if I smile too much, something bad will happen. Like I'm not supposed to be this happy." Mrs. Holloway's heart ached. "You know what I think?" she said. "I think joy is brave. And you, Mila, are one of the bravest girls I know." Mila looked up. "Even when I'm scared?" "Especially when you're scared," Mila nodded, slowly, and then she smiled. That evening, Henry sat Mila down after dinner. "There's something we need to talk about," he said gently. She looked up, already sensing the weight. "A man called today. He saw your father the night he—" Henry paused. "The night he saved you." Mila's eyes welled. "He did save me. 18. I know he did," Henry said. "And we're going to honor that. We're helping the police find the people who hurt him and you. Will they get in trouble? If we do our job right." Mila was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "Does that mean we're going to tell my story too?" Henry nodded. "Only if you're ready." She swallowed. "What if it makes people mad?" He leaned in, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Then let them be mad, but don't ever be silent." And 2 weeks later, Mila sat beside Henry on a community center stage, in front of an audience of parents, teachers, officers, and survivors. The event was small, meant to raise awareness about reforming child protective oversight, but for Mila, it felt like standing in the middle of a storm. The host handed her the mic. Her hands trembled, but she stood. "My name is Mila Carter," she began, voice small but steady. "And I used to be invisible." She told them about hiding under beds, about skipping meals so Eric could eat, about pretending to sleep when yelling started. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't hurting, but because she was healing. And at the end, she said, "I'm not a secret anymore. And neither are the others." The room stood. Some wept. Henry didn't applaud. He just stood up and walked to her, pulled her into his arms. "Did I do good?" she asked against his shoulder. "You changed everything," he whispered. Back home, after the lights and the questions and the hugs from strangers, Mila sat on her bed, holding her bear close. "Daddy? Yes? Do you think Eric saw?" Henry didn't answer right away. He sat on the edge of her bed, looked at the stars on the ceiling, the ones she'd made him promise never to repaint. I think he never stopped watching. Mila nodded. Okay. Then I hope he knows. I'm okay now. Henry smiled. He knows, Mila. He knows. Outside, the city lights pulsed, not with noise, but with presence, and in the quiet that followed, Henry felt something rise in his chest, a roar not made of sound, but of purpose. Justice wasn't a destination, it was a path, and they were walking it together. It started with a letter, delivered by courier, hand-addressed, sealed with a crest Henry hadn't seen in years, an invitation to the annual Cole Foundation Gala. A legacy event, one Henry had hosted for decades before stepping down, but this letter wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to Miss Mila Rose Carter. Marjorie found him staring at it that morning, coffee growing cold in his hand. Well? She asked. Henry blinked. They invited her. Not me. Marjorie leaned in, her voice kind. Because she is you now. He nodded slowly, the truth settling in. She is. At school, Mila found the envelope in her backpack, tucked beside her lunchbox. Her eyes widened. Is it bad? She asked Henry when he picked her up. No, he smiled. It's important. She looked down at the embossed card again. Do I have to give a speech? Not unless you want to. She considered that. Then maybe just a sentence. Henry chuckled. That's often more than enough. The day of the gala arrived crisp and gold, like autumn had paused to watch. Mila wore a pale blue dress Marjorie had tailored from one of Henry's old ties and silk scraps. It shimmered slightly under the lights, not from glamour, but from memory. You look like yourself, Henry said when she stepped out. She frowned. Isn't that bad? He knelt, fixing her collar gently. It's everything. At the venue, an old museum converted for charity events, the air buzzed with polished voices and practiced charm. Henry guided her gently through the crowd, introducing her to people who suddenly forgot their rehearsed lines and hollow compliments. Because when Mila looked up and said, "Hi, I'm Mila," something disarmed them, something real. Near the back of the ballroom stood Miss Abigail Kerr, chair of the Cole Foundation, a woman Henry had once tried to buy out of a deal and who had never quite forgiven him for failing. She approached, heels clicking against the marble floor, eyes sharp. So, she said, glancing between them. This is the girl. Mila curtsied awkwardly. Yes, ma'am. Abigail raised an eyebrow. You know why you're here? Mila nodded. Because people forgot about kids like me. Abigail blinked. And? She prompted. Mila tilted her head. And I think they shouldn't anymore. Abigail turned to Henry. She's better at this than you were. I know, he said proudly. I wasn't complimenting you. I still know. Abigail turned back to Mila, softening. Would you like to speak tonight? Just a few words? Mila hesitated. Then, yes, but only one sentence. Abigail smiled. Sometimes. That's all we need. When the lights dimmed and the podium glowed, Mila walked to the stage alone. No one guided her. No one followed. She stood behind a microphone nearly taller than her and adjusted it with effort. People in gowns and suits looked at her, puzzled at first, then hushed. Mila looked out across the room. My name is Mila Rose Carter, she said. And I am not invisible. She stepped back. Silence, then applause. Not polite clapping, but rising. People stood not for drama, but for truth. Not for a speech, but for a name. And somewhere, among the sea of suits and sequins, Henry wiped a tear he didn't think he'd ever shed in public. Afterward, reporters tried to approach. Donors, too. But Mila clung to Henry's hand and simply said, No questions tonight. He grinned. My little publicist. She looked up at him. Did I do okay? You did perfect. They walked out into the night. Autumn leaves circled their feet, catching in her curls. Did Eric ever go to fancy parties like that? She asked. Henry shook his head. No. But he played music outside them, and I bet he wondered what it was like inside. She smiled. Then maybe he heard me. I'm sure he did. She paused, holding his hand tighter. I think he'd like my name. Henry looked down at her. He'd love your name, because it's yours now, and you made it mean something. Back home, Mila changed into pajamas and climbed into bed, but before she pulled the blanket up, She reached under her pillow and pulled out a drawing, her and Eric standing on a rooftop, stars behind them, Henry in the middle. "Can we hang it?" she asked. "Where?" "Over the door." "Why?" She smiled sleepily. "So every time I leave, I remember who came before." Henry nodded, and as he tacked the picture to the wall, he realized something. Legacy wasn't just what people left behind, it was what children carried forward. Snow had begun to fall by the time the first call came in. Henry stood in the kitchen, stirring hot cocoa while Mila added exactly 13 marshmallows to hers. "For luck," she said. Marjorie was humming along to Bing Crosby on the radio when the landline rang. She picked it up with the practiced grace of someone who had answered thousands of calls over a lifetime. But this time, her voice caught. "Henry," she said, holding the receiver to him. "It's the mayor's office. 2 Agent Friedais." He raised an eyebrow. "What on earth for?" She just smiled. "You'd better take it." An hour later, Henry sat in his study. Phone call finished. Cup gone cold. Heart unsteady. The mayor wanted him to speak. Not at a gala, not at a fundraiser, but at the city's annual Day of Honor, dedicated to New York's unsung heroes. For the first time in years, they were naming a public award after a civilian, the Eric Carter Courage Award. I didn't expect that," Henry told Gregory, who had come over immediately upon hearing the news. Gregory leaned back. "You earned it." "No," Henry said quietly. "He did." That Friday, the award ceremony took place on the steps of the old city library, Eric's favorite spot. The weather had turned gray, with snow dusting the edges of the granite steps. A modest crowd had gathered: community workers, foster advocates, students, and more than a few former street musicians holding worn guitars. Mila held Henry's hand tightly, her other clutching a framed picture of Eric. The mayor gave a short speech, then handed the microphone to Henry. He walked slowly up the steps, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to remember. Every single one, every step Eric had taken carrying Mila, hiding her, loving her when the world didn't. He looked out across the crowd and spoke. Eric Carter was a father, a protector, a musician, and the kind of man I hope to become even now. He held up the framed photo. He died doing what most of us are too afraid to live for someone else. He took a breath, voice cracking just slightly. This award bears his name, but its meaning belongs to everyone who has ever stood up when they could have stepped aside. He looked down at Mila, and to every child who's ever waited for someone to open the door. After the ceremony, Henry and Mila stood by the library wall, where the city had installed a permanent plaque with Eric's name. Below it read, "Courage is not loud. It's the quiet hand that reaches back for someone else." Mila traced the letters with her mittened fingers. "Does this mean he's famous now?" Henry smiled. "I think it means he's remembered." She nodded. "That's better." Weeks passed. Winter settled in fully, but inside the brownstone, warmth bloomed. Mila began piano lessons. Henry signed the paperwork to convert the Cole Foundation into a new initiative focused solely on children's advocacy. And on Saturday mornings, they volunteered together, Mila helping serve soup at shelters, Henry reading books to restless kids whose lives echoed hers. But one moment changed everything. It was a knock. At the door, Marjorie answered, then called softly, "Mr. Cole?" He stepped into the foyer. There, just beyond the threshold, stood a woman with tired eyes and a small boy clinging to her coat. Her name was Sarah. She had seen the news, read the stories, heard about Mila. "He's been in the system a year," she whispered. "I don't know where else to go." Henry looked at the boy about 6, silent, eyes dark and searching. Then he looked at Mila, who had walked up beside him, holding her bear. She reached out to the boy, smiling gently. "I used to be scared too," she said. "But this house is nice." Henry looked down at her, then back at the woman. "You're not too late," he said. "Come in." The woman stepped forward. The boy followed, and the door, like Henry's heart, stayed open. That night, as Mila fell asleep with her bear in one arm and a storybook in the other, Henry sat in the doorway of her room, watching the rise and fall of her breath. He thought of all the doors he had once closed, and all the ones still left to open. Legacy, he had learned, wasn't what you left behind. It was who you let in. And love? Love didn't knock. It moved in. This story reminds us that family isn't defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and the courage to show up when it matters most. It teaches us that healing begins when someone chooses to see the invisible, to listen to the silenced, and to protect the vulnerable not for praise, but because it's right. In a world where power often speaks the loudest, this story whispers a quiet truth. Compassion changes everything.